Welcome to the global sailing survival game. The words echoed in my head as I slowly opened my eyes. A strange, genderless voice told me that the rest of my life would be spent at sea. It promised to heal every disease and disability, giving us all a relatively fair starting point. We were free to sail, free to become legends or nobodies. There was only one rule to follow: keep moving. Don't let the black fog catch you. The fog was currently moving at 10 knots. I sat up and immediately started coughing. Dust filled my lungs. I was lying on an old, rickety bed in a cramped, dimly lit room. Looking around, I saw a desk nearby. Slumped over it was a dry, withered skeleton. Its left hand clutched a rusted flintlock pistol, and half of its skull was missing. It looked like a suicide. I wasn't scared. Instead, I looked down at my thin hands. I stood up. It was a miracle. Just minutes ago, I was a paralyzed patient, bedridden and helpless. I had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis at 12, and by 20, I couldn't move a muscle. I never gave up, though. I learned to play games and stream, using only my mouth to support myself. I lived through horror games and virtual nightmares for years, so a skeleton didn't bother me. The voice hadn't lied. I was healthy again. I looked out the window. There was nothing but the vast, endless ocean, waves tossing under the sun. The strange voice spoke again. It told us we were all separated by at least 500 nautical miles. We wouldn't be meeting anyone anytime soon. Beside me, I found a small black booklet glowing with a faint light, the logbook. I picked it up and opened the first page. The rules were simple but chilling. No one could board my ship without permission. My items couldn't be stolen unless I was dead. Every ship had a grappling hook with infinite durability to scavenge floating items. I had to upgrade my ship to stay safe. Most importantly, I had to watch out for the night, the mist, and the black fog. If the fog touched me, I was dead. The book was soul-bound. I could flip through it in my mind. The texture felt like human skin. I skipped the weather report and checked my stats. My name, Yang. Status, healthy. My attributes were low, mostly 3s and 4s out of 10, but my spirit was a 7. High spirit meant better resistance to going insane. Then I saw my talent, Iron Will. Because I never gave up in my past life, my spirit cap was increased, and I would always retain at least 1 point of sanity. I wouldn't commit suicide, even if I went mad. I flipped to the chat channels. The world channel was exploding. Is anyone there? I was on the toilet. I didn't even wipe, and now I'm on a boat. Who kidnapped me? Do you know who my father is? My broken arm is healed. This is real. Billions of people were online. Everyone on Earth had been pulled in. I stayed quiet, reading the messages to gather intel. You only got 10 free world messages a day. After that, it cost conch coins, which I didn't have. Slowly, the panic turned into information sharing. People were comparing ships and items. One guy posted a bloodstained harpoon, a relic-grade item that could hurt monsters but risked lowering your sanity. Wait, monsters? Others found water, bread, or sausages. Then, someone posted their ship stats. He had a 100-meter-long ship called the Iron Heart, with a built-in cannon and a combat skill. This is unfair, people screamed. He has a cannon, and I have a wooden plank. Wait, someone pointed out. His ship's speed is only 5 knots. The black fog is 10. He's a sitting duck. A global announcement popped up, silencing the chat. It explained that everyone's starting point, their ship, their items, and their talents, was based on their past life and personality. There were no appeals. I closed the logbook and looked back at the skeleton in my cabin. I reached out and took the rusted gun from its bony fingers. Item name, waterlogged rusted flintlock. Quality, fine. It didn't need bullets and reloaded automatically in 1 minute. But because of the rust, it only had a 50% chance of actually firing. Still, it could deal heavy damage to abyssal demons. I gripped the gun, my expression turning serious. The announcement was right. This wasn't just a game, it was a reckoning. My survival had already begun. If everyone started with the same basic conditions, then me finding this gun meant I was playing on hard mode. I pushed the skeleton's hand aside and noticed a piece of paper tucked under its arm. It was rotten, the edges crumbling to dust, but I could still make out some of the faded ink. The note was a desperate log. It said there were no supplies left. The previous owner had tried fishing and got lucky with a tiger grouper, enough for 2 days. Then, he mentioned fishing up an antique pistol. He complained that he didn't have enough gunners, but the gun itself seemed valuable. The rest of the page was soaked in a massive, dark bloodstain. Only the last line was legible. How can there be such a thing in the sea? I frowned, a chill creeping up my spine. I left the captain's quarters and stepped out onto the deck. I needed to see exactly what kind of ship I was dealing with. I opened my logbook to check the stats. My ship was named the Nightmare. It was level 1 with 300 durability and a 400 unit capacity. Its top speed was 40 knots, which was decent, but the abilities section made my heart sink. It had a trait called Nightmare Hull. Sleeping on this ship caused horrific nightmares and cut my energy recovery by 75%. Worse, it had the Angler's Curse. I would never be able to catch a normal fish. This thing was a ghost ship. Barnacles and thick seaweed clung to the hull like parasites. The deck was perpetually damp, groaning and creaking under every step I took. I'd played enough horror games to know this was the perfect setting for a jump scare. I searched every inch of the 12-meter deck, but luckily, I was the only living, or moving, thing on board. The layout was simple. There was a raised helm at the bow for a clear view, the captain's quarters behind it, a central mast, and a cargo hold at the stern. I checked the hold. It was empty. No crates, no bugs, just a thick smell of mold and rot. My starting supplies were 0. It made sense. A ghost ship drifting for centuries wouldn't exactly have fresh bread in the pantry. I checked the world chat again to see how others were doing. Most people had basic boats, but a few stood out. Someone had the Gale, a ship with 800 durability and a massive speed boost that let it hit 70 knots. Then there was the Sakura. It had a literal cherry blossom tree on deck that emitted evolution light. The description warned that it might change the crew's attributes, adding a snarky note. Hope the crew stays human. The chat went wild. One guy, Roy, was bragging about his evolution. Another player, Captain of the Iron Heart, threatened to blast him with his 20 cannons. The Iron Heart looked like a floating fortress in the screenshots, but everyone just laughed at him. With a speed of 5 knots, he wasn't catching anyone. I silently typed, "Count me in," regarding the trash talking and kept scrolling. I found what I was looking for, fishing. People were actually catching things. One guy even pulled up a bottle of mineral water. I looked at the fishing rod leaning against my deck. It was a moldy barnacle-covered rod. It was a relic grade item, but the description was grim. It decreased the chance of catching fish and increased the chance of pulling up unknown objects. The note added, "Trust me, you won't like what it catches." Still, unknown could mean water. I had to try. I grabbed the helm to set my course. The controls were surprisingly easy, pure magic. I didn't need a crew or even a sail. The ship responded to my touch like an extension of my own body. I aimed the bow away from the distant wall of black fog and pushed for full speed. As the Nightmare cut through the water, I focused on the floating debris scattered across the waves. It felt like a game of gold miner. I used a hook to snag pieces of trash as we passed. Rotten wood +1. Rotten wood +1. Torn cloth +1. Each piece of debris went straight into the hold. I did the math. The conversion rate was terrible, less than 10%. I spent 3 hours hauling in over 100 pieces of junk, which only netted me 5 units of timber and 3 units of cloth. To upgrade the Nightmare to level 2, I needed 200 timber, 100 cloth, and 1 captain's remains. I looked back at the cabin. I knew exactly where those remains were. I couldn't throw that skeleton overboard. It was an upgrade material. At this rate, it would take me at least a week of nonstop grinding just to level up once. This world wasn't just a survival challenge. It was going to be a long, dark grind. I wondered if my situation was unique, so I opened the global chat channel to investigate. I was right. Standard white-grade ships required far fewer resources to upgrade. Only 100 units of timber and 50 of cloth. More importantly, they didn't need any captain's remains. Then there was a guy with a ship called the Iron Heart. His upgrade required steel bars. Everyone in the chat was clowning on him. Where do you find steel in the middle of the ocean? Iron sinks. But then a legendary fishing god chimed in, claiming he'd just pulled up a unit of steel. Another guy started shouting that he'd make anyone who gave him steel his subordinate. People told him to shut up and worry about surviving the night. The black fog was already on his heels. It seemed special ships weren't all perks. They were harder to upgrade, which meant I could easily fall behind in level. I needed to get to work. I grabbed my moldy, barnacle-covered rod and prepared to fish. The weather was perfect, clear skies and not a cloud in sight. According to my log, I had 5 hours of daylight left. The temperature was mild, between 12 and 20 degrees. I took a deep breath and checked my status. My sanity was at a full 100 and my stamina was at 90. I used the log's simple crafting function to turn 5 units of wood into a crude spear. I tucked my flintlock pistol into my belt, too. If I hooked a monster, I wanted to be ready to take it down with physical force. My log confirmed that fishing didn't technically require bait. Maybe it was the system's power at work, but using bait would definitely improve my efficiency. I cast the line. The hook cut a perfect arc through the air and splashed into the water. I wasn't an expert fisherman, but I had nothing but time to learn. 15 minutes passed. The bobber didn't even twitch. I opened the world chat again to see what others were catching. One guy posted a photo of a 100-centimeter sea bass. Everyone told him to get lost. Another guy claimed he hooked something ultra-huge, but lost it. Then I saw a warning that caught my eye. A user told everyone to watch out. If something felt wrong, we should cut the line immediately. There was no penalty for it, and the line would regenerate as long as the rod wasn't lost. "What did you catch?" someone asked. "It looked like a human silhouette," he replied. I cut it instantly. "Probably a mermaid," someone joked. "You just released your future wife." "No way," the guy shot back. "It was wrong. Look at my rod." He shared his item stats. It was a refined carbon fiber rod, a fine grade item. Its description said it could be passed down to his grandson, increased success rates, and slightly boosted the chance of catching unknown objects. I felt a pang of envy. My rod was a piece of junk. But then I saw others complaining they didn't even have rods and were still using hooks on strings. One guy bragged about his ship, the Fisherman, which had high speed but low durability. He tried to pull up a 3-meter great white shark that nearly ate his boat. Now, he cut the line on anything too big. People were catching more than just fish. Some found treasure chests. Others found crates of bottled water. One guy even pulled up a balloon. I wasn't sure I wanted to know if that balloon was used or not. I braced myself. If I saw something terrifying surfacing, I'd cut the line without hesitation. Suddenly, the bobber jerked. Something was biting. I gripped my rod, spear, and pistol within reach. The bobber sank. "Now!" I yelled, pulling back with all my might. There was no resistance. I didn't see a massive shadow in the water. I just yanked the thing straight onto the deck. It was a tiny fish, about the size of my thumb. It looked like a streamlined sardine, but it wasn't a normal fish. It had 4 long, human-like legs growing from its sides. The fish stood up on its 4 legs and stared at me. I stared back, completely stunned. "You discovered a strange fish. Sanity -2. The fish suddenly turned and tried to sprint back toward the edge of the deck with its long legs. I didn't think. I just slammed my logbook down on it, crushing it instantly. Name: long-legged sardine. Type: food. Description: an abyss species. They say eating it will give you long legs. Edible, non-toxic, and delicious, but requires courage to eat. May decrease sanity. I picked it up. It weighed less than 100 grams. Its pale legs were broken, but they felt exactly like human skin, rubbery and elastic. I remembered my ship's trait, the angler's curse. I would never catch normal fish. I snapped a photo and shared it to the World Channel, asking if anyone else had seen one. The chat exploded. "What the hell is that? Visual pollution." My sanity just dropped by 10 points. "Blocked. I'm blocking you forever." I was instantly blocked by millions of people. My contribution to the world was a mass drop in sanity. But then, a private message popped up. "Is the water where you are black?" a user named Sude asked. "If it is, leave immediately. You're being influenced by something unknown." I looked at the beautiful blue water around my ship. "No," I replied. "My ship is just a ghost ship." "Whoa," Suda responded. "Impressive. Let's be friends." I accepted his request. He warned me not to post any more photos because his sanity was already down to 54. I realized I had to be careful, but I needed food and water. I kept fishing. You caught a long-legged sardine. You caught a long-legged sardine. You caught a three-legged long-legged sardine. Sanity-1. The system was definitely messing with me. Anyone else would have gone insane within a day on this ship. After 3 hours, I had 8 of those freaky sardines, but not a single drop of fresh water. You can live a week without food, but only 3 days without water. Desperate, I hooked one of the sardines onto my line as bait and cast it out again. As the sun began to set, the sky turned a bruised purple. I was starving, and those long-legged sardines on the deck were starting to look delicious. Just as the light faded, the line went taut. I pulled up a waterlogged treasure chest. I stared at the long-legged sardines on the deck. Eating them would likely tank my sanity, and without a stove, I'd have to eat them raw. I wasn't that desperate yet. Suddenly, my buoy jerked. I snapped to attention and pulled hard. A black fish flew out of the water. This one didn't have legs, but it was covered in sharp spines and a thick, sickly mucus. As soon as it hit the deck, the membranes on its skin ruptured, oozing a black, foul-smelling liquid. It was disgusting. Sanity-2. Before I could even finish it off with my spear, the thing stopped moving. It was dead. Name: cystic pufferfish. Category: food. Asterisk description: an abyss-dwelling fish. Its fluids are highly toxic. No sane person would eat this unless they wanted to die. Asterisk. Toxic. 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 The warnings repeated in my head. I didn't even want to touch it. I used my spear to skewer the carcass and toss it into the hold. I made sure to rub the tip of my spear in the black goo until the wood stained dark. Now, I had a poisoned weapon. The sky was bruising into a deep purple. I had less than an hour of light left. The system had warned that the night was dangerous, so I prepared to pack up my gear. But as I turned toward the captain's cabin, something caught my eye in the waves. It was a chest. It was about the size of a briefcase, bobbing right past the side of my ship, the Mengyan. My heart skipped a beat. I sprinted to the helm and spun the wheel, desperate to intercept it. This was an opportunity one couldn't miss. I fired the ship's grappling hook, but the chest seemed alive. It slipped and slid through the water, dodging my attempts. After a frantic struggle, I finally hauled it onto the deck. Name: near-water downcast treasure chest. Category: treasure chest. Description: this might not be the kind of treasure you're looking for. I felt a chill. I kept my flintlock pistol aimed at the lid and used my spear to pry it open from a distance. Inside sat a human head. It was hairless, with pale gray skin covered in a layer of slime. The moment the light hit it, the head twitched. Its cloudy eyes snapped open, and it began to speak. "Sir, could I have a few minutes of your time? Let me introduce you to the all-knowing chest, the master of..." I couldn't understand the rest. The words sounded like static and screaming. Sanity-5. My scalp tingled. My body began to shake. "Sir, could I..." In a flash, the head lunged. It wasn't just a head. It was an octopus with a human face for a body. A mass of squirming tentacles propelled it toward me, revealing a sharp, bird-like beak at the center of its underside. It wanted a piece of me. Bang! The flintlock roared, a flash of fire spitting from the barrel. The gun didn't misfire. The heavy report sounded like the growl of a beast, and the octopus head exploded into a cloud of shredded meat. Sanity-3. The sound of the shot echoed in my mind, making me feel a sudden, burning nausea. I checked my status immediately. Sanity, 88/100, Stamina, 62/100, Health, 100/100. The drop in sanity was starting to mess with my head, but my mental attributes were high enough that I stayed grounded. My will was like steel. I calmed down and examined the remains. Name: human head octopus. Type: food/material. Asterisk description: an abyss species. Don't try to understand its words. It's just a trick to distract you. If you actually understand it, God help you. Asterisk. Asterisk edible. Toxic mild. Eating grants strength +1, constitution +1, spirit -1, sanity-20. Asterisk. It was valuable, but the cost was high. I gathered the meat scraps and looked back into the chest. There was no fresh water. Instead, I found a handful of rusty coins. One side featured a seashell, the other had a cartoonish octopus head. You obtained 100 shell coins. Great. Money I couldn't spend and no water to drink. The sun vanished. I tossed the captain's old skeleton into the hold and retreated to the cabin. I wasn't going to risk night fishing. If I got desperate for food, I'd eat the leggy sardines, but for now, I just needed to survive the night. I'd find water tomorrow. I lay down on the old, moldy bed. It was damp and smelled like rot, but I had no other choice. Outside, the world went pitch black, save for a few slivers of moonlight. The only sounds were the wind and the crashing waves. I couldn't sleep. I opened the world chat to see how others were doing. "You can catch treasure chests with the grappling hook," I posted. It wasn't a huge secret, but sharing it might earn me some goodwill or better info in return. "It's true," someone replied. "I got a wooden chest with steel, wood, and cloth. I'm upgrading my ship soon." "I found a bronze equipment chest," another user bragged. "Got a bloody pearl necklace. It gives agility +1, but it lowers my sanity cap by 5. Totally worth it." "My ship has no lights," a third person complained. "I'm freezing to death." Then, the tone changed. "Is it just me, or are the waves getting bigger? The bigger the waves, the better the fish. Night fishing starts now. Wait, do you guys hear singing? It's actually really pretty." "Singing? Don't scare me, man. There's nothing out there but water." "I see her. There's a beautiful woman singing in the waves. She's waving at me." "Bro, check your sanity. That's a siren. She's so beautiful. She's swimming toward me." "Get inside. Lock the door." The user stopped responding. I frowned. The system's warnings weren't a joke. I listened closely, but I didn't hear any singing. I crept to the cabin door. The lock was broken, just a useless ornament. So I cracked it open a sliver and peered out. The ocean was empty. After a few minutes of silence, I rushed to the helm. I slowed the ship down to 10 knots. It was fast enough to keep distance from the encroaching black fog behind me, but slow enough to avoid crashing into something in the dark. I went back inside, placed my flintlock on the nightstand, and leaned my spear against the wall. I watched the chat until my eyes grew heavy. Eventually, I drifted off. But sleep brought no peace. Faint, distorted whispers filled my ears. I tossed and turned, sweat soaking my brow as the first nightmare of the deep sea took hold of me. I tossed and turned on my bed, cold sweat drenching my forehead. The nightmares were relentless. While I struggled in my sleep, something was happening inside the hull of the nightmare. The skeletal remains of the former captain suddenly twitched. The dry bones began to tremble, and a flicker of ghostly soul fire ignited within its shattered skull. With a sickening series of creaks and cracks, the bones ground together as the skeleton forced itself upright. It didn't come for me. Instead, it walked out of the lower cabin and paced slowly toward the bow. It reached the captain's quarters and gently pushed the door open. Inside, I was still trapped in my dreams, tossing fitfully. The skeleton watched me for a long time, its hollow gaze unreadable. Then, its attention shifted to my barnacle-encrusted fishing rod leaning against the wall. It reached out, took the rod, and walked back out without a sound. It headed to the open deck pavilion and quietly began to fish. 10 minutes later, something bit. A pale, bloated hand reached out from the dark waves and grabbed the fishing line. Back in the room, the nightmare reached its peak. I bolted upright, gasping for air. I immediately clutched my stomach, checking for wounds. When I found my skin intact, I let out a shaky breath. I had just dreamed of a water-bloated corpse, a drowned one, creeping into my room. The dream had been so vivid I could still hear the sound of its footsteps. Slap, squelch, slap. It sounded like a wet mop hitting the floor. In the dream, the corpse had reached my bedside before I woke up. I had grabbed my flintlock and pulled the trigger. Click, a misfire. The next second, the monster pinned me down like a fish on a cutting board. It ripped me open, and I watched my own warm organs spill onto the floor. A system notification flashed in my mind. Asterisk, you experienced death. You were brutally killed and consumed. Sanity-15, asterisk. Just a dream, I whispered, wiping sweat from my face. Thank God. But then I froze. The cabin door was wide open. I scrambled for my flintlock. There was no wind tonight. The door shouldn't have moved. Asterisk slap. Squelch. Asterisk. That familiar, wet sound echoed from the darkness. A bloated drowned one appeared in the doorway. It looked like it had been soaking in the ocean for weeks, swollen, stinking, and dressed in tatters of a sailor's uniform covered in seaweed. Its pale, milky eyes locked onto mine. Asterisk, you have encountered an unknown entity. Sanity-5, asterisk. FK. I cursed, leveling the gun and firing. Click. The gun jammed. The corpse seemed to possess a sliver of intelligence. Seeing the misfire, it peeled back its lips in a gruesome, toothless grin. A small crab crawled out of its mouth. This was exactly like the nightmare. I didn't panic this time. Since the gun didn't fire, I used it as a projectile, hurling the heavy flintlock at the monster's face. It hit him square in the head. While the creature stumbled, I grabbed my spear and charged. I drove the tip deep into its rotten neck and slammed my body weight into it. I wasn't trying to kill it yet. I just needed to get out. I had to get to the open deck, where I had room to fight. I shoved past the monster, the stench of its decay nearly making me gag. Asterisk, the disgusting odor makes you nauseous. Sanity-5, asterisk. I broke free and sprinted to the bow deck. I turned back and saw the creature lumbering after me. It was slow and clumsy. I could win this. My adrenaline spiked, my breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps. I used the raised platform of the helm as a barrier, circling it to keep the monster at a distance. In my head, I started a countdown. The spear was still lodged in its neck, but the creature didn't seem to care. I led it in one more circle, then suddenly broke away and ran back into the cabin. I snatched the flintlock off the floor, cleared the jam, and aimed. At this distance, I couldn't miss. The gunshot was deafening, sounding less like a blast and more like a high-pitched shriek of agony. The strange sound of the shot disturbs you. Sanity-2. The shot went slightly wide, but it still tore off half the creature's head. Black, thick fluid sprayed across the deck. The drowned one tottered and fell forward with a heavy thud. I let out a breath, my nerves finally starting to uncoil. I walked toward the body to retrieve my spear. But as I reached out, the dead thing moved. Even with half a head, it wasn't finished. A pale, massive hand clamped onto my ankle with crushing force. Its fingernails dug deep into my flesh. Still not dead, I growled. I grabbed the spear and drove it straight through the hole in its shattered skull. The grip on my ankle finally loosened. As it died, the creature turned its head to look at me one last time, its eyes filled with pure malice. Then, its bloated stomach began to expand rapidly. Self-destruction. I threw myself backward just as a dull explosion rocked the deck. A rain of foul meat and bone fragments sprayed everywhere. Because the creature was face down, most of the blast hit the deck, but I didn't escape completely. 2 teeth pierced through the sole of my left shoe, stabbing into my foot. A sharp fragment of bone sliced my right arm. The sight of the remains is revolting. Sanity-2. I struggled to my feet and pried the severed hand off my ankle. I checked my status. Status, injured. Sanity, 55/100. Stamina, 40/100. Health, 91/100. I pulled off my left shoe and gritted my teeth, yanking the teeth out of my foot. Luckily, they hadn't gone deep. I stood up and looked at the remains. The skeleton of the creature was shattered. Its ribs were embedded in the wooden deck like arrows. If I hadn't jumped back, I would have been turned into a pincushion. A notification appeared in my log. Entity identified, the drowned king. Description, an unfortunate soul who died at sea. Driven by resentment for the living, he rises again. Can be used for the monster gas-upon machine. Monster gas-upon? What the hell is that? I muttered. Then, a chilling thought hit me. I had seen the drowned king outside my door, but who had opened the door in the first place? The door was open before he arrived. My skin crawled. Behind me, I heard the soft sound of footsteps. Before I could turn, a sharp pain flared in my left shoulder. Something had stabbed me. There was something else on this ship. I lunged forward and spun around, clutching my bleeding shoulder. Standing there was a skeleton with half a skull, soul fire burning in its eyes. It was the captain. He was alive, and in his hands, he held my fishing rod like a weapon. The tip of the fishing rod was stained red with my blood. The skeleton captain stared at me, its jawbone clicking open and shut rapidly, as if it were laughing at my pain. "You old sneak," I hissed, my eyes burning with rage. "Warning, you have been ambushed by a king-tier entity. Sanity -10. Sanity is below 50. You have entered the frenzy state. I felt a strange shift in my mind. The fear vanished, replaced by a cold, violent clarity. In this state, I was immune to most mental debuffs. My strength increased by 2 points, my agility and constitution by 1. My mental stats dropped, but I no longer felt pain. I was tireless. I was fearless. I raised my flintlock and pulled the trigger. Click, it misfired. The skeleton lunged, using my fishing rod like a spear. Even though I couldn't feel the pain, the wound on my foot still hampered my movement. Circling this 2-meter-tall monster on a slippery deck was too risky. One wrong move, and that rod would skewer me. I changed my tactics. Instead of retreating, I charged. I hurled a makeshift spear at the skeleton. It caught between its ribs, causing it to stumble for a split second. That was all the opening I needed. I closed the distance. I still had the flintlock in my hand, and a gun makes for a decent club if you hold it by the barrel. I swung the heavy handle, aiming for the crack in its skull, right where the soul fire flickered. The skeleton reacted instantly, dropping the fishing rod to grab my arm. It seemed terrified of the gun. We locked eyes, or rather, I locked eyes with its empty sockets, and began a desperate struggle for control. The skeleton's strength was high, but in my frenzy state, I was stronger. Still, I couldn't land a clean hit. If the gun went off now, I might shoot myself. I needed a plan. Even in a frenzy, my mind worked fast. It wanted the gun? Fine. Let it have it. I wrestled with the creature for a few more seconds, positioning the barrel. I pulled the trigger again. Click, another misfire. I immediately let go of the weapon. As I expected, the skeleton's focus was entirely on the gun. I used its distraction to break free and sprinted toward the cabin. When the skeleton followed, it found me huddled in the shadows, my face smeared with something dark and foul. I was devouring the remains of the human-headed octopus I'd killed earlier. Asterisk, you have consumed the human-headed octopus. Strength +1. Constitution +1. Spirit -1. Sanity -20. Duration, 1 minute. Asterisk. My strength surged. Combined with the frenzy, my power had doubled. In this world, strength didn't grow linearly. It was exponential. I felt like I could tear the ship apart with my bare hands. I lunged at the skeleton before it could react. It was still staring at the flintlock, wondering why the weapon wouldn't fire. I tackled it to the deck and pinned it down. With a roar, I ripped its arm bones clean out of their sockets and tossed them overboard. The skeleton's jaw clicked frantically. It was trying to plead for mercy. I didn't give it any. I reached my hand into the crack in its skull and squeezed the soul fire. It wasn't hot. It felt strangely warm, like a dying coal. The skeleton shuddered violently, and then its bones collapsed into a heap of lifeless calcium. The fire went out. To make sure it stayed down, I grabbed the flintlock, pressed it against the skull, and pulled the trigger one last time. Boom. The skull shattered into white dust. Sanity -1. I leaned back, breathing hard. It seemed that killing these things gave me information, but at a heavy cost. I dragged the remains into the cabin and kept the arm and leg bones. I'd played enough games to know that a headless skeleton can be just as dangerous as a whole one. I patched my wounds with some old cloth and staggered back to the captain's quarters. I checked my status. Asterisk status, injured. Sanity, 24/100. Stamina, 21 out of 100. Health, 82/100. Asterisk. I was exhausted. I opened the world chat and typed a single sentence. If you're sleeping tonight, lock your doors. The chat exploded. Big shot, what did you find? A sea monster. Did you kill it? Did it drop any loot? No loot, I replied bitterly. Just pure torture. I closed the channel and lay down on the bed, sliding the skeleton's leg bone under my mattress like a weapon. I kept the gun in my hand. I tried to sleep, but the adrenaline and the horror kept me awake until the first light of dawn touched the horizon. When the sun finally rose, I felt like a ghost. My face was pale, and my eyes were shot through with blood. I walked out onto the deck and stopped dead. In the middle of the deck stood a new statue. It was a cartoonish octopus man with wings, sitting on a stone pedestal. A notification popped up in my log. Asterisk last night, 13,000 survivors successfully killed a monster. One survivor achieved a double kill. A special talent will be awarded based on your performance. Asterisk. At the same time, A notification announced that the monster gasapon machine was now open. We could feed it monster remains in exchange for rewards, and the bodies would be forcibly recycled. A warning followed: don't throw trash or living creatures inside. That would only make the machine angry. The world chat exploded instantly. There are monsters in this world? What do they look like? Let me go home. I'll give you anything. There are talent rewards? I missed out big time. A skeleton banged on my door last night. I didn't open it. If I'd known, I would have fought it. If you'd opened that door, you'd probably be dead right now. The conversation shifted to the machines. Everyone was trying to find them. One person found theirs on the bow, a cute, big-faced cat. Another had a cartoon robot in their cabin. One poor soul had a creepy clown sitting right in their captain's quarters. It seemed everyone's machine looked different. I turned to look at mine. It was a cartoonish octopus monster with a massive, gaping mouth. Tentacles dangled from its chin like a beard, waiting to be fed. A new notification popped up. I had received a talent reward, but it was locked. Condition to unlock, 0/3. I stared at it, annoyed. A reward that I had to unlock? That felt like a scam. I checked the chat again and saw everyone complaining about the same thing. The unlock conditions were all over the place. Some people needed thousands of points, others needed millions. My requirement of 3 seemed incredibly low by comparison. The conditions themselves were bizarre. One person had to walk 100,000 steps. Another had to breathe 3 million times. One guy just had a progress bar of 0/100ths with no instructions at all. He guessed he just had to survive for 100 days. I looked at my 0/3 and shook my head. I decided to let it happen naturally and focus on the machine. The captain's skeleton was too precious to gamble with, so I grabbed the severed hand of the drowned king. I tossed it into the octopus's mouth. As soon as the flesh hit the slot, the machine's eyes glowed a deep red. The tentacles on its chin began to cycle through colors like neon ribbons. I turned the crank on its chest. Mechanical clunks and rattles echoed through the room. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. It was a twisted kind of fun. After a moment, a glowing orb rolled out. I picked it up, and it transformed into a vial of deep blue liquid. Item: Wish of the Drowned King. Type: Consumable. Quality: Good. Effect: Restores 20 sanity. For 1 minute. You will be perceived as the drowned king and will not be attacked by low-level demons. My eyes widened. This was a top-tier survival tool. In a game like this, an item that could stop an attack or restore sanity was priceless. The world chat was buzzing with people showing off their loot. Someone got a bone token, a fine-quality relic that could summon a skeleton to fight for 15 minutes. The catch? Once the time was up, the skeleton would turn and attack the summoner. Another person bragged about a serrated dagger. It was sharp and comfortable, but its description noted it only dealt trace amounts of damage and was embarrassingly short. The chat didn't let him live that down. Relics seemed better than weapons, but they carried the risk of draining sanity or having nasty side effects. My rusty flintlock dealt significant damage, but the 1-minute reload and the sanity drain kept it balanced. I looked away from the screen and pulled out half of a long-legged sardine. I was starving. After last night, my standards had dropped. Survival was the only thing that mattered now. You ate a raw long-legged sardine. Sanity -2. The fish tasted slightly off, but it wasn't rotten. It gave me energy and a little bit of hydration. I finished the whole thing, finally feeling a hint of fullness. I checked my status. Asterisk status: Injured. Sanity: 74/100. Stamina: 52/100. Health: 83/100. Asterisk. Sleep had helped, but the nightmares and insomnia meant I hadn't recovered fully. My shoulder wound was still tender. I worried about infection. On my status screen, the silhouette of my body showed a yellow mark where I'd been stabbed. I headed back into the cabin. My priority for the morning was setting traps. The monsters didn't seem very bright, so I didn't need anything fancy. I used the basic crafting function to turn my remaining cloth and wood into long ropes and thin wooden slats. In this world, wood could be shaped into whatever I needed. One unit was roughly a cubic decimeter. I strung the wood pieces together and hung them across the hallway and the door to the captain's quarters. I tested it. The sound of the wind was distinct from the clatter of someone bumping into the slats. It was a simple early warning system, but it worked. By the time I finished, the morning was gone. I was out of wood and cloth. I needed to get back to the deck to fish for more resources, specifically fresh water and maybe a stray treasure chest. But as I stood up, I felt a wave of heat wash over me. My face felt flushed, and a sharp pain stabbed at my stomach. I froze, my heart racing. Something was wrong. I pulled up my status window immediately. My name is Yongi. I stared at my status window, and my heart sank. Status: injured. Damp poison infection, mild. Food poisoning. Mild diarrhea. The silhouette of my body on the screen had turned a sickly yellow. Around my wounds, the color was even darker, a bruised, angry purple. It was exactly what I had feared. I was infected, and I was stuck in the middle of the ocean with zero medicine. I looked at the morning forecast. It was a clear, sunny day, perfect for fishing. I had 8 hours of daylight left. The temperature was comfortable, but I was shivering. I grabbed my rod and started fishing like my life depended on it. I didn't just need water anymore. I needed medical supplies. I quickly checked the world chat. Someone mentioned they had caught a common quality medical bandage that helped with inflammation and healing. If bandages existed, then real medicine had to be out there too. I just had to find it. I cast my line. You caught a piece of rotten wood. You caught a long-legged sardine. You caught another long-legged sardine. You caught a piece of tattered cloth. Damn it. I cursed, my voice rasping. I cast again. Nothing but junk. Every failed pull felt like a hammer blow to my morale. I spent 2 more hours fighting the waves, but my condition was deteriorating fast. My wounds started to itch. It was an unbearable, crawling sensation under my skin. I clenched my teeth and forced my hands to stay on the rod. I couldn't scratch. If I broke the skin further, the infection would win. The diarrhea was draining the fluids and salt from my body. Between that and the rising fever, my vision started to blur. My head felt heavy, and my feet felt like lead. I checked my status again. Asterisk status: injured. Damp poison infection, moderate. Fever. Food poisoning. Mild diarrhea. Just a little longer, I whispered to myself. Just one good catch. Then, the line jerked hard. I pulled in something I'd never seen before. It was a fruit the size of a fist, but it looked exactly like a human eyeball. It even blinked at me. Item: eyeball fruit. Asterisk description: a creepy-looking fruit from the abyss. Slightly sweet. Replenishes vitamins, salt, and water. Asterisk. I didn't hesitate. I bit right into it. A thick, black juice sprayed out, and the fruit shivered in my hand. Sanity decreased by 2. It was terrifying to look at, but it tasted way better than raw sardines. The flesh was grainy and sweet. I finished the whole thing in seconds. Almost immediately, I felt a wave of relief. The cramping in my stomach eased, and the diarrhea stopped. The infection was still there, though. I spent the rest of the day hoping for medicine. I told myself a fisherman can catch anything if he's patient enough. But by nightfall, the medicine never came. I did manage to snag a bottle of fresh water, though. My haul for the day: 2 eyeball fruits, 8 long-legged sardines, 10 wood, 9 cloth, 1 cystic pufferfish, and 1 liter of fresh water. I stored the bulk materials in the ship's hold. It wasn't a physical room I could walk into. It was more like a digital inventory where resources were stored as data until I needed to manifest them. I took out a bottle of Farmer's Spring water and drank a third of it. I had to ration. Water was becoming a luxury. As darkness fell, I retreated to the captain's quarters. I kept my flintlock pistol right by my side and collapsed onto the bed. The fever and the throbbing infection made sleep impossible. Between the physical pain and the lingering nightmare curse, I knew I was in for a long night. I opened the chat channel to distract myself. It was still buzzing with activity, but I noticed something chilling. The online player count was gone. People were dying silently, disappearing without a trace. One guy was bragging about making spears to kill skeletons. Someone else shut him down immediately. Skeletons don't have flesh, idiot. They have piercing resistance. Use your fists instead. Then I saw a message from a guy named Steel Bear. He was looking for 982 units of iron. Steel Bear, you're still alive? Someone asked. Grandpa Bear will outlive all of you, he shot back. I'm outrunning the black mist right now. Far behind the rest of us, a massive steel warship was tearing through the waves. The black mist was right on its heels, moving at 10 knots. Thousands of fish were leaping out of the water, fleeing the same darkness. On the bridge of that ship, a middle-aged man with a thick beard and a cigarette in his mouth gripped the wheel. He looked cool in the chat, but in reality, he was sweating bullets. His ship was a tank, heavy armor, infinite ammo, but it was slow. He looked at the mist behind him. He had stayed ahead by using a giant harpoon gun to hook onto massive sea monsters, letting them tow his ship at high speeds. "Come on, you stupid fish, don't die on me yet," he muttered, reeling in his line as his current engine gave out. He aimed at a new target, something big and fast. He had only slept 3 hours. Anything that tried to attack his ship was met with overwhelming cannon fire. He called it civilizing the ocean. The next morning, I woke up with a headache that felt like a spike through my skull. I didn't know when I'd finally fallen asleep, but my dreams had been filled with foul, nauseating imagery. My recovery was pathetic. A full night's rest only brought my stamina back to 30. The infection had worsened. The itching was gone, replaced by a dull, throbbing ache. That was a bad sign. Even worse, the wound started to smell, a cloying, rotten stench like a fish that had been dead for a week. My stats, strength, agility, and constitution had all dropped by 2 points. I was officially in a weakened state. But I didn't despair. I had spent 5 years paralyzed in a bed before this. I knew how to fight when the odds were 0. I hobbled out of the cabin, ate 2 eyeball fruits and a few sardines for breakfast, and picked up my rod. I cast the line. You caught an eyeball fruit. You caught a long-legged sardine. You caught a piece of rotten wood. I just had to keep pulling. Eventually, the sea would give me what I needed. It had to. My vision blurred, and the world tilted. Before I could catch myself, I collapsed onto the deck. Darkness took me. A strange, mechanical voice echoed in my mind, pulling me back from the void. Asterisk system announcement. Congratulations to all players for surviving the 5th day. The trading system is now officially open. Please check your logs for details. Asterisk. I groaned, my eyes fluttering open. The sun was blinding. The 5th day? I had been unconscious for over 2 days. My limbs felt like they were filled with molten lead. My skin was ice cold, but my throat felt like it was on fire. I was parched, my lips cracked and bleeding. I forced myself to check my status. It was a blood-red nightmare. Status: heavily wounded. Corpse poison infection: severe. Sanity: 100/100. Stamina: 23 out of 100. Health: 14/100. The system warned me that anything below 30 was a critical injury. Below 10 was the near-death state. If I took a single hit now, I was finished. I struggled to crawl, desperate to find something to drink. I needed to stabilize myself and check the new trading channel for medicine. But as I dragged my body up, I froze. There was another ship moored alongside mine. It was a 20-meter pirate vessel flying a skull and crossbones flag. 2 massive grappling hooks held my ship, the Nightmare, in a deadly embrace. A narrow wooden plank connected the 2 decks like a bridge. Panic flared, but it was too late. A sharp whistle cut through the air. An arrow slammed into my left arm with bone-crushing force. It punched straight through. Health: 9/100. Status: near death. I collapsed instantly, rolling behind the edge of the deck for cover. I heard the creak of wood. Someone was crossing the plank. They weren't looking for a fight. They were coming to confirm a kill. That arrow hadn't hit a vital organ, but because I dropped so fast, the attacker couldn't be sure I was dead. The rules of this world prevented him from boarding the Nightmare while I was alive and conscious. He had been lurking, waiting for me to show my face so he could finish me and claim my ship. A cold, murderous rage washed over me. You want to kill me? Fine. But don't complain when I return the favor. My left arm was useless, pinned by the arrow, but my right hand was steady. I gripped my flintlock pistol. With a silent command, I manually lowered the boarding restrictions on the Nightmare. I knew he didn't have heavy firepower. If he did, he would have blown my cabin to splinters days ago. The man stepped onto my deck. He looked like a nightmare himself. Pale skin, bloodshot eyes, and a stench of decay that rivaled my own. But his expression turned to pure horror when he saw me sitting up. I looked like a corpse. My skin was gray, and I smelled of rotting fish. I raised the heavy barrel of the flintlock, aiming it straight at his chest. Don't move, I rasped. My voice sounded like grinding stones. Touch that bow, and I'll blow your head off. He froze. In reality, the gun was a gamble. A flintlock is most dangerous when it hasn't been fired. If I pulled the trigger and it misfired, I was a dead man. If it worked, he'd be a memory. Drop the weapons. Now. The man hesitated, his eyes darting around. I stood up slowly, the arrow still protruding from my arm. I didn't even flinch. To him, I must have looked like an unstoppable zombie. I reached into my shirt with my free hand and pulled out a massive eyeball fruit. The thing actually twitched in my grip, sensing its fate. I didn't care. I bit into it, juice like black ink spraying across my face and dripping down my chin. Your sanity is dropping. I looked down at the deck. Rotting sardines and the mangled remains of a cyst pufferfish lay scattered around my feet. To a normal person, it looked like a cannibal's larder. Sanity below 30. The man let out a high-pitched, terrified shriek. The fear of the unknown and the sheer wrongness of my presence finally broke him. He dropped his bow, turned tail, and scrambled back toward his ship. He was fast, but I was faster. I leveled the flintlock and pulled the trigger. Click. Misfire. The sound was small, lost in the wind, so he didn't realize how lucky he was. I didn't panic. I dropped the gun and grabbed his discarded weapon. Item: Pirate Longbow, fine quality. Increases accuracy and reduces draw strength. I grabbed the arrow sticking out of my own arm, snapped the head off, and dipped it into the ruptured gallbladder of the dead cyst pufferfish on the deck. That fish was pure poison. I notched the arrow. I was too weak to draw the string to full tension, and my aim was shaky, but at 3 meters, I didn't need to be a marksman. Thwack! The arrow buried itself in his thigh. I had aimed for his chest, but it didn't matter. He screamed, ripped the arrow out, and kept running. He reached his helm and steered his ship away as fast as the wind would take him. I didn't chase him. I collapsed back onto the deck, gasping for air. I was a mess. I couldn't feel pain anymore, and my wounds weren't even bleeding, just oozing a clear, foul liquid. I was turning into one of them. I crawled back to the cabin, drank every drop of water I had, and forced down the rest of the eyeball fruits. Once I felt a spark of strength return, I looked out at the sea. His ship was a tiny speck on the horizon. I gripped the wheel of the nightmare and began to follow. I wasn't worried about him getting away. I was waiting for the poison to work. Pufferfish toxins are legendary for a reason. 15 minutes later, I caught up. His ship was drifting aimlessly. I repeated the process, hooked his ship, laid the plank, and crossed over. It took me 4 tries just to move the wooden board. I was that weak. The man was lying on the deck, motionless. I didn't trust it. He could be faking, waiting with an antidote in his hand. I stood 5 meters back, leveled my flintlock, and pulled the trigger. Click. I sighed. I waited a full minute, cleared the pan, and tried again. Boom. His head vanished in a spray of red. Only then did I approach. After my encounter with the drowned king, I wasn't taking any more chances. I searched his body. A glowing orb floated above him. You obtained 400 conch coins. I also stripped the coat off his back. It was a bloodstained, ornate pirate uniform. Asterisk item: bloodstained pirate garb, relic. Quality: fine. Effect: agility +1. Warning: sanity will continuously decrease while equipped. Requires 8 spirit to wear, asterisk. I looked at the bloodstained pirate uniform. The stats were decent, but the warning was clear: it would drain my sanity constantly. To wear this, the previous owner must have been on the brink of madness, or already gone. I didn't care. I shoved the clothes into my inventory and prepared to loot the rest of his ship. As I moved, I noticed something strange in my logs. My lock skill, the one with the question marks, had changed. The unlock requirement had jumped from 0 to 1 out of 3. Was the condition for unlocking it to kill other people? I couldn't be sure exactly when the counter flipped, but it was a chilling thought. I didn't feel any guilt about the kill. Maybe it was my high spirit stat, or just a growing numbness to this world, but I felt nothing. I put on the pirate garb. It felt icy cold against my skin, and I felt my sanity dip by 5 points immediately. For anyone else, the continuous drain would be a death sentence, but with my high mental resistance, I could ignore it for now. Walking into the cabin, a notification pinged. I now had the full specs of this vessel. It was the Pirate, a level 1 special ship. It had a massive durability of 1,000 and a speed of 45 knots. It even had unique skills, extra grappling hooks on both sides, and a pirate raid ability that boosted speed by 25%. The description was simple. The skull flag is the soul of this ship. Strive to be the pirate king. I searched my logs for a way to swap ships. Return valid JSON only. I spent several minutes digging through menus, but there was no option to change my primary vessel. It didn't matter. Even with those extra hooks, the pirate couldn't compare to the nightmare. Predicting the future through bad dreams was worth 100 grappling hooks. I began clearing out the rooms. In one of the lower cabins, I froze. I found a woman's body. She was naked, and the signs of abuse were sickeningly clear. A large piece of her leg was missing, and the bruises on her neck were fresh. The blood hadn't even dried yet. I wasn't his first victim. I was just the one who fought back. Thinking about where that missing leg went. Sanity -2. I frowned. The previous owner's mental state was even worse than I'd imagined. He wasn't just a pirate. He was a monster. I turned my focus back to his supplies. I found 2 loaves of hard black bread, 5 liters of fresh water, 125 units of wood, and 98 units of cloth. A system prompt appeared. You have captured an unowned vessel. You may dismantle it. Dismantling would give me 100 wood, 50 cloth, and a blueprint for the pirate. Only special ships dropped blueprints, and they could only be used once to upgrade a vessel. I did a quick mental calculation. My nightmare only had a capacity of 400 units, and I was currently carrying very little. If I broke this ship down, I'd have just enough room to take everything. It was a massive haul, enough to upgrade my ship to level 2. I grabbed a dozen crude arrows I found in a corner and stepped back onto the nightmare. With a tap on my log, the pirate began to break apart. It disintegrated before my eyes, the materials flying into my storage hold like a whirlwind. I had the resources to upgrade now, but I had a more pressing problem. I was dying. My health was stable for the moment, but the corpse poison was eating my mind. My sanity had dropped below 80. It wasn't the clothes, it was the toxin. I needed a cure. I opened the trade channel. It was a mess of people shouting prices. Emergency bandages, 10 conch coins. Only 5 left. Rum for disinfection, 30 coins. Selling balloons. If you know, you know. The market was in its infancy. People were guessing at prices, and many refused coins entirely, preferring to barter for wood or cloth. Then I saw it. A high-quality listing. Asterisk item. Holy water, fine. Description. Blessed water for internal or external use. Cures various toxins and curses. Speeds up healing. Asterisk. That was it. I checked my assets. I had the Drowned King's Grudge, the Pirate Bow, my flintlock, the Pirate Garb, the Barnacle Rod, the new blueprint, and 500 conch coins. I wanted to keep my gear if possible, but my life was worth more than a blueprint. I messaged the seller. His name was hidden. How much? I asked. Minutes passed. He must have been flooded with offers. Finally, he replied. I need cloth. Lots of it. Or survival gear, weapons, food, and water. I didn't have time to haggle. I was losing my mind 1 point at a time. I threw out a massive offer. Take it or leave it. I offered the Drowned King's Grudge for 100 coins, 30 wood, 58 cloth, a loaf of bread, and 4 liters of water. It was a king's ransom for a small bottle. He replied in less than 10 seconds. Your offer is much more sincere than the others. A friend request popped up immediately. Zhou Dai, captain of the Goddess of Light, has requested to add you as a friend. I accepted Yang Yi's friend request immediately. A string of messages flashed across my vision. Compared to you, everyone else is just making trouble, he wrote. I have 4 bottles of holy water left. Your injuries sound severe, and 1 bottle might not be enough. I'm sending you 2. Consider it a gift for our first meeting. He introduced himself as Zhou Dai, the captain of a ship called the Goddess of Light. He claimed his ship could produce holy water and suggested a long-term partnership. May the Goddess of Light protect you, he added with a friendly emoji. I stared at the trade window, stunned. It was almost too smooth. It seemed he really needed the Drowned King's Grudge for protection. From this deal alone, he seemed like a decent person. I looked at the ship name, Goddess of Light. It made me wonder if a player's ship reflected their personality. Across the water, the Goddess of Light was a stunning sight. It was a pure white, three-masted sailing ship made of sturdy white oak, looking holy and pristine. Zhou Dai himself was a tall, handsome man with blonde hair and blue eyes, yet he possessed delicate Asian features, a mixed-blood beauty. He was currently inside a special room on his ship called the Prayer Room, which housed a statue of the goddess. His ship was only level 1, and while the prayer room produced holy water, the output was incredibly low. He had his own problems. Undead spirits constantly hounded his ship at night. A survival item like the one I gave him was exactly what he needed to buy time to hide in his sanctuary. We finalized the trade through the system log. I tossed my items into the monster gashapon machine. This bizarre, colorful machine acted as a neutral middleman, ensuring neither party could cheat. You didn't mess with the gashapon machine. It felt like an outer-dimensional boss that was better left unprovoked. The system deducted the wood, cloth, and water directly from my storage. A moment later, the machine spat out 2 glass vials filled with a clear, colorless liquid. I uncorked one. It had no scent. I downed it in one gulp. Pain flared through my body instantly. It felt like I was being burned alive from the inside out. A scorched smell filled the air, but my mind suddenly cleared. My spirit felt refreshed. It was working. I checked my status and felt a surge of relief. The drowned infection had dropped to medium severity, and my health began to tick upward. I drank the second bottle to seal the recovery. I then spent 50 conch coins to buy 5 emergency bandages. I didn't have the recipe to craft them myself, so I had no choice but to pay the premium. Now came the hard part. I gripped the sword embedded in my left shoulder and pulled. I hissed through my teeth as the agony spiked, but the pain felt cleaner now that the toxin was fading. I washed the wound with a bit of fresh water and wrapped it tight. I checked my panel one last time. My status was injured, but the infection was now minor and fading. The human silhouette on my display turned pale yellow, with darker spots only at the wound sites. My sanity had bounced back to 93. My energy was at 35, and my health was at 19 and rising. I let out a long breath. I had survived. With the remaining resources, it was time to upgrade the nightmare. I didn't hesitate. I clicked confirm, and the ship was enveloped in a sickly green glow. Ghostly spirits drifted around the hull as the wood groaned and expanded. The nightmare was now a level 2 ship. Suddenly, a global announcement rang out across the sea. Over 10,000 players had reached level 2. The Sea of Origin was changing. In 3 days, an unprecedented storm would descend upon these waters. The world chat exploded. People were panicking, scrambling for wood and cloth to upgrade before the storm hit. Prices skyrocketed. I watched the messages fly by. Someone on a ship called the Iron Heart was trading fish for steel. Another player on the Gale was looking for wind essence. Then, a player on the Farmer offered fresh cucumbers, cabbage, and apples for seeds. I was surprised. A farming ship? That player was sitting on a gold mine. Every special ship clearly had its own unique advantage. I looked down at the blueprint I still held, the pirate ship blueprint. It was a special grade item that could transform a ship into a pirate vessel with higher speed, grappling hooks, and even cannons. I realized its true value. If I used it on a higher level ship later, I could skip the massive resource costs of a standard upgrade. I checked my updated ship stats. The Nightmare was now 20 meters long. Its durability had doubled to 600, and its speed had hit 50 knots. However, the Nightmare trait meant my sleep quality would be terrible, and the Angler's Curse meant I'd likely never catch a normal fish again. At the bow, a rusted iron chain now bound a skeleton to the wood, the remains of the previous captain. Inside the cabin, a new room had opened up with 3 expansion paths. I could choose an extra cargo hold for double capacity, a great statue to strike fear into other ships, or an ancient combat room equipped with 2 clean water cannons. I didn't have to think twice. I chose the combat room. In this world, nothing provided a sense of security quite like a pair of cannons. I checked my supplies. I had plenty of wood, but I was out of cloth and still needed steel and sulfur for the cannons. The path to level 3 was locked until I finished this expansion. I looked out at the dark horizon. The storm was coming, and I needed to be ready to fight it. I finished setting everything up and immediately got back to fishing. I needed to stock up. In this world, you could never have enough food. Dozens of nautical miles behind my ship, the Nightmare, another vessel was cutting through the dark water. It was a strange, special ship about 10 meters long. What made it terrifying wasn't its size, but the massive crystal ball sitting on its deck. It was over 3 meters in diameter, glowing with an eerie light. This was the Battlestar, a level 1 vessel. Its stats were impressive. It had 500 durability and could carry 800 units of cargo. It was fast, too, hitting 50 knots. But its true power lay in its unique ship skill, also called Battlestar. The crystal ball acted as a supernatural radar. It displayed a sea map of every ship within 100 nautical miles, revealing their exact names. It also had a secondary ability called spying. Once a day, the captain could project a visual image of any ship on that map. It couldn't see through the fog of islands, but it could find any sailor on the open sea. I didn't know it yet, but someone was looking for a target, and I was within their range.